This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Zaxara the Exemplary EDH deck. Thank you for joining us for another installment of the Up and Up series. Here today we are going to update and upgrade Zaxara the Exemplary. In the description of this video you can find a deck tech for Zaxara, the up-to-the-moment updated complete deck list for Zaxara as well, in addition to this build's video primer series. We've got some cards going in, that means some cards are coming out, so let's begin right away with our first new card going into Zaxara, and that is Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia. Here we have a 2/3 Legendary Elf Druid Scout for 2 and 1 green mana. We can tip her sideways to add 2 mana in any combination of colors, but we can only spend this mana to cast creature spells or activate abilities of a creature or creature card. That will not be a problem in this deck. Whenever we cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, another non-problem in this deck, we put a +1/+1 counter on Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, and then we untap her. We will have the ability to utilize Gwenna multiple times during each of our turns. We have a number of creatures that we can use and a number of ways in which that we can tip her sideways. Gwenna is going to help accelerate our mana, which is also going to allow us to get to our game plan quicker, getting Zaxara into play and doing all kinds of +1/+1 countery and token shenanigans. With Gwenna going into the deck, which she will eventually go into play, she's going to replace Kruphix, God of Horizons. Here we have an indestructible god for 4/7 with devotion to Simic colors of 7. 3 and Simic colors is the mana value here. We have no maximum hand size, and if unused mana would empty from our mana pool, that mana becomes colorless instead. Alright, so there's a couple of detractions here with Kruphix that I don't know if any other Zaxara players have ever experienced, or any Kruphix players for that matter that might be in the 99 of their builds, or 98, is that with the investment of the 5 mana, putting Kruphix out into play gains us nothing. It does nothing on the battlefield. It only acts as a mana battery. And I gotta be honest, I'm not really keeping mana back. I'm trying to generate as many +1/+1 and X spells as possible in order to flood the battlefield and overwhelm our opponents. I'm not holding mana back, and if I am, it's generally for some removal or disruption spells during my opponent's turns. Yes, I could end up tapping that mana at the end of my last opponent's turn to put it as colorless mana into Kruphix, but then that means I would have used 5 mana to put this mana battery out there, which, let's face it, outside of the mana that it could store, it doesn't really do much of anything else for the theme of this build. So with Gwenna going in and doing so many good things with mana acceleration and +1/+1 counters on herself, it makes replacing Kruphix that much easier. Card number 2 going into our Zaxara build, and that's going to be the Unnatural Growth. There's not a lot that we need to focus on here, except maybe, just maybe, a slightly intimidating mana value of 4 green mana when we're playing a 3-color build. However, we do have green in this build, so that also means that we have lots of ways to fix our mana. So we should not have any trouble casting Unnatural Growth during any part of the game, and if we get it onto our side of the battlefield, it's only going to close out those games that much more quickly. At the beginning of each combat, we double the power and toughness of each creature we control until end of turn. If that's not a combat deterrent for our opponents, I don't know what is. And if we have some evasion on our side of the battlefield, trample, flying, whatever we can do, doubling the power of all of our X +1/+1 creature spells and tokens, well, like I said, that's just going to lead to a round of good games oh so much more quickly. Unnatural Growth is going in, and it's going to replace Asceticism. Now, this was initially included as a form of protection, mainly for our biggins, because it was always in my mind that if we were to invest a great deal of mana into a creature like a Hydra, that we wanted to make sure it was protected in some ways, and Asceticism provided a nice blanketed form of protection for all of the biggins on our side of the battlefield. However, once again, with more and more games under my belt and playing this build, it became more and more apparent that we really didn't need to worry about just one of these creatures. With Zaxara's ability to create these tokens with the XX +1/+1 counters, and having Hydra after Hydra after Hydra going into play, and then casting Hydras on our side of the battlefield, having blanketed hexproof protection to prevent our opponents from interacting with one of them, never really came up. So we're replacing one 5-mana value enchantment with another, this one with Unnatural Growth being so much more proactive than the reactive Asceticism. I think we're going to end up finding much better results overall with Unnatural Growth taking the spot that was once held by Asceticism. All right, we're down to our last 2 cards. Card number 4 going into Zaxi. It is Doomsday Confluence. I am looking forward to playing with this card. I can't wait to see what it can do in a Zaxara build. Here we have a black sorcery, XX, and a black mana. Don't let that double X be intimidating. That just means that whatever value you pay for X, you have to pay that same value for both of them. We get to choose X, and we may choose the same mode more than once. Either each player sacrifices a non-artifact creature, either we create a 3/3 black Dalek artifact creature token with Menace. I'm not sure what Menace is, but this will be with Menace. And then each opponent discards a card. More often than not, we're going to look to get rid of the non-artifact creatures that are on our opponent's sides of the battlefield, because we should have plenty that we can get rid of because of the number of tokens that we can create, and I'm not so sure that our opponents will be able to say the same. And if that seems to be a lose-lose proposition, well, then ridding our opponents of their cards in their hand is a very nice secondary prize. So Doomsday Confluence is going in, and I'm looking forward to see how that rolls out with the 99 here in Zaxara. We're going to test that one out. That's generally a spell that I would usually kind of back away from because of the different modes. I mean, one of them could end up hurting us by sacrificing our own creatures, but that doesn't mean that we have to choose that mode either. It could be a good way to just quote-unquote reset the battlefield if needed. We'll see on gameplay, and if we have to come back here to the Up and Up series, then we will. With Doomsday Confluence going in, it is going to replace Profane Command. Now here with Profane Command, it was an X and 2 black, and we picked 2 of the following 4 modes. Target player loses X life, or we return target creature with converted mana cost X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, which I'm going to stop right here to say that was usually an option that was not available to us because most of the creatures that are going to be in our graveyard are going to be Hydras, and they are 0/0. So if we brought them onto our side of the battlefield with Profane Command, they die immediately and go right back to the graveyard. So for the purposes of balancing out what this card can do in our Zaxara deck, what we're really looking at is probably picking 2 out of the 3 modes here, which is pretty much what we're doing with Doomsday Confluence anyways. So the 3rd mode is target creature gets -X until end of turn, and then up to X target creatures gain fear until end of turn. Now the fear is an interesting mode here on this spell. We're running Hydras, so we've got trample in and out of the yin-yang, not to mention flying as well. So dedicating a spot for a modal spell where one of the modes barely touches us at all, the Graveyard Recursion, and then the evasion recursion of giving them fear, we're already trampling over everything that they have in front of them. Having the fear just seems like overkill. Whereas the -X could get rid of one creature, and then the target player loses X life, well, that could get rid of a chunk of an opponent's life. I would rather focus on the Doomsday Confluence and what it can do to the actual battlefield, as opposed to Profane Command, which, let's face it, is really just going to get rid of one creature on the battlefield. All right, here we go, MTG BC, our last card going into Zaxara today. It is the Goose Mother. I think you knew it was only a matter of time until this bird Hydra found its way into the 99 of our Zaxara build. We have a 2/2 for X and Simic colors, and it has flying. And as when the Goose Mother enters the battlefield, the Goose Mother enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counter, just like a typical Hydra. And when it does, we create half X food tokens round round it up, and then whenever it attacks, we may sacrifice a food, and if we do, we draw a card. X could be ginormous in this deck. If you've been following this series along, if you've been following Zaxara since its inception, you know that creating big-time mana is what this build can do. And with the Goose Mother here, we can create a ton of food tokens, and all we have to do is tip this Goose Mother sideways, send it into combat, sacrifice one of those foods, and then we draw a card. And the incidental life gain is not unwanted either. I mean, once we flip over and show that we have Zaxara, we're pretty much going to become target number 1 at the table, and the food tokens can help us to recoup some of that lost life by becoming target numero uno. With the Goose Mother going in, it's going to replace the Mist Cutter Hydra. I like this guy. I like what the Mist Cutter Hydra could do. X and a green, it can't be countered. Haste, protection from blue. But if we're not worried about blue, then we just have a big Hydra with no evasion. And Zaxara is already providing a lot of those. And the Goose Mother can do what the Mist Cutter cannot. The Goose Mother can fly. And the Mist Cutter can just get chump blocked for days outside of it not having any outside form of evasion. So the Mist Cutter's coming out. The Goose Mother's going in. And you can let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.